Hey guys, today I'm going to talk about Wandering Earth. It's a sci-fi film that's doing really well in China, nearly $300 million in total box office. I really like the general spirit and ideas of this movie. I think there are some really cool visuals. I think the structure of this movie is very blockbustery. On execution, I really could not get into this movie. This movie constantly took me out with big logic issues and characters that didn't seem fully developed. I want to put a disclaimer that while I really didn't like this film, in my theater there's a bunch of Chinese people and people stayed and clapped at the end. So I think a lot of people really enjoyed it. And also one of my friends, she really liked it, and we had a good talk about why she thought it was really good and why I thought it was really bad. So I definitely want to talk about that perspective. But first, I'm just going to focus on what I felt. The Wandering Earth is adapted from a novella by a Hugo Award-winning author called Liu Cixin. And this is the perfect example of you can write amazing stories, you can have a great book, but screenwriting and movies is a completely different beast. This film is set in the future. The sun is dying out, so Earth needs to find a new home. And as opposed to moving to a new planet, the people have come up with this really cool idea of pushing the Earth towards a more habitable part of the solar system, and they build 10,000 rockets on one side of the Earth, and it propels the Earth through space. And while that's moving, there's another space station. It's set in the future and the sun is dying out, so humanity has united together. They've built 10,000 rockets on the Earth, and it's pushing Earth into a more habitable part of the solar system. And it's going to be a really long trip, so they also have a space station out front, and that's to keep it protected from asteroids or any other things. Yeah, Earth is on the move. Our main characters are a father and son. That's who we open with. And the father tells the son that he needs to go to the space station to help Earth. And he basically has to be away for 17 years. And we hop back to 17 years later, and the son's grown up and the father's working on the space station. Everyone has to live underground because the world is basically in a super ice age because they're going away from the sun. As they come close to Jupiter though, Jupiter's pull gets the best of them, and then a group of people go on this mission to reactivate a big propulsion thing that will help push them away out of Jupiter's orbit. Again, overall structure was fine. The ideas that it was trying to say were positive, but the issue was it felt like the things that a lot of the characters didn't make sense. And secondly, I didn't really care about anybody because we didn't really have a backstory or clear goals. Eventually, most of our main characters have goals, which is doing something to save the Earth, but we don't really know what's motivating them. The son of the astronaut in space, he has this adopted younger sister that he takes care of. So that's a fine motivation, but he never really says what he's fighting for. We can assume that he's angry at his dad, but in the opening scenes, he's running off because he wants to go outside. He's been pent up, that's assumed, but why? What's his goal? There are other soldiers or people that are trained specifically to help restart the propulsion engines on Earth in case they get damaged. And there's some mishap, like boulders will fall down, and they just start freaking out. One person shoots at Jupiter. They threaten to kill each other. They just seem really untrained. Scenes seem to end really early, and then there's no in-between. It feels like they just ran out of money, which might be true because this is a really ambitious project. $50 million is a lot for a Chinese production, but for a sci-fi film of this magnitude, usually you need more. If you look at where this movie is set, a lot of it is in these smaller rooms. There are still big set pieces, but it's all constantly shaky cam. There's not anything very patient about it. It just feels like they're in a rush, but not that much happens. All of our characters are doing stuff, but again, we just don't know why. Now, for the other side, my friend Yu was telling me that it's a very Chinese thing that we don't need to know why they're doing things. It's for the good of everybody, so they just do their jobs. When I countered that it didn't even seem like they were that good at their jobs, she made an interesting point. She said that basically in Chinese culture, home or the land you sit on is so important to you. That's why this story resonates with Chinese audiences, is because they're actually moving the land as opposed to running or finding another planet. That's how important Earth is. So they move it, and then when things go bad, it's such a scary thought to lose your home that they don't act rationally. In my opinion, it's just bad writing. I feel like everything in this movie could still happen structurally the way it does, but then on the scene level, it could be more convincing how they talked. We could learn more about the characters. There could just be a better quality of interaction and also gaps that could have been explained. Even while this journey is happening on Earth, when a bunch of people are struggling to relight this fuel thing, the father character is in space and he's worried about his son. Everyone else is in hibernation. So we're kind of cutting back and forth between Earth and the space station. What's his goal? He doesn't really have a goal. Like, yes, he misses his son. Eventually we discover there's a big conspiracy of some sorts going on. But it doesn't make sense that on a space station with thousands of people, he's the only one who wants to contact his son. I imagine there's a lot of other people that have loved ones, and when they discover that they're actually in trouble, they would also maybe not want to go to sleep and try to figure out what's going on. That was a problem for me, and that wasn't the only thing. There were just a bunch of those logic issues that I don't think are a hard fix. If they just gave the father a job that maybe he was the last person that needs to go to sleep because he's responsible for putting people to sleep, then it would make more sense why he's up and why he's more worried about everyone else. As is, so many things could have been fixed, I think, with better writing. It seems like they did the bare minimum to push the story along. Whenever I got super lost, there was this United Earth government that would come onto the intercom and just kind of explain things. This is on the space station. And I could just feel the writer or the 7 writers of the screenplay, when they got stuck at a moment and they didn't know how to explain things to the audience, they just used United Earth government to explain exposition or anything that they didn't properly explain before. One thing to note is that this movie had 7 writers. 7 writers listed in the credits is a lot. In any big movie, there can be a couple of writers and many more that are uncredited, but to have 7 credited writers, that means there are so many hands in this pot, everybody trying to get their own ideas across. And that actually explains a lot of what I think happened to this movie, why it felt so unfocused, why there were so many stories going on that all lacked depth. They weren't able to organically incorporate information as the movie's going along or through action. It's just literally United Earth government explaining things or Moss the robot explaining things. And Moss the robot has very bad dialogue. We could actually all agree on that. That's what this movie felt like. It just felt like a very rough draft. The dialogue also was pretty poor. I think every character said, "Mom, I want to go home," at least once. And we get it. It felt pandery as well. There was just like, it's Chinese New Year's, we need to go home, even after the programming says there's 0% chance of success. All that is fine in a generic blockbuster, but it's cheesy. That was the same problem with Interstellar, that a lot of people who enjoyed it still agreed that it was cheesy. This didn't have nearly as tight of a story or cool of an idea as Interstellar, but it had the same cheesy dialogue. Also, some scenes also just last too long. Like right in the beginning of the movie, there's like 30 minutes of the sun escaping to the outside. I feel like that could have been 5 or 10 minutes and we would have gotten the same amount of information. There's nothing we really learn in that half an hour other than he has a young adopted sister, he doesn't like being there, and we see a little glimpse of the world. We only need 5 minutes of that. And then there's these side missions where people are dying, but they don't really have good deaths. They just kind of die. And counterpoint, you just said that, you know, that's kind of what happens. And why do they need these grand deaths? People can just die without meaning, sure, allowed to do that. But the problem is this movie feels like a blockbuster. It follows the beats so closely. It was so predictable. By the end of Act 1, I knew exactly what was going to happen, and at no point did it surprise me or do anything interesting. It's completely derivative of much better sci-fi movies, and there are direct influences. Like there's a robot with a red light called Moss. I mean, obviously that's like an homage to Hal. He even kind of sounded like it. Hal from A Space Odyssey. It feels very similar to Interstellar. It feels very similar to 2046 because of the Ice Age. And yeah, they're blockbusters. You don't have to go super deep into character. It was just, I was getting taken out of the movie. Counterpoint, to you, it didn't matter. She felt like all of the themes of fighting for your home, of unity, of people sacrificing themselves, they were so powerful and affecting for her that she honestly didn't care or didn't even see the issues I was talking about. And she really, really enjoyed the movie. And a lot of people in theater did. But me and my Asian American friends, we all didn't like it. Maybe if I grew up in China, I would like this more. I don't think it's because I don't understand the culture. I just think I've watched more movies. Right now, when it's trying to be 2001: A Space Odyssey, and it's trying to be 2046, and it's trying to be Interstellar, there was just too much. I think if you just chose one and try to make something more similar to that one, that would have been a stronger movie. And this movie could have had all of its same themes about unity, about loving your home, about sacrificing yourself for the greater good, but it could have just been executed better. And all of those feelings could have been even stronger. This is a film I can't recommend just because I really didn't enjoy it. I thought it had too many issues. I feel like I learned a lot about what the Chinese audience is like. And it's always cool to see more sci-fi movies, especially with an all-Chinese cast and other diverse side characters. I'm a little baffled at how popular it is in China, so I want to fully accept that there's something that I don't get. I can make assumptions about why everyone likes it so much, but I don't want to assume. I'm just going to say that if you grew up in America and you watch this, it's going to feel super derivative from much better movies, and you're probably not going to enjoy it that much because there's nothing here that you haven't seen before. Definitely in disagreement with a lot of the Chinese viewers, but that's just how I felt. That's all I got. Sorry if that felt a little ranty. I had high hopes for this movie. There was a lot of positive buzz and I wanted to like it, but I just couldn't get into it. Thank you all so much for watching. Have you seen this film? What did you think? One thing I really did like though was Nakman Tat was in this movie, and he always plays Stephen Chow's sidekick in a lot of his older films, and it was really cool to see him back on screen.